Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. Tonight, dear reader, you venture into a dark forest to see if she's real, to catch a glimpse of the bony-legged witch, Baba Yaga. You've been in forests before, but this one is much more suffocating than you're used to. The air is damp with the stale, mossy smell, and the earth below you feels like a slimy, saturated sponge. You feel as though your foot could break the surface at any moment, and you could plummet into the pits of hell. But it generously keeps you from slipping under, for now. The trees around you seem to be rotting in the damp environment, and the twigs you step on bend and flex instead of break. Yet there must be life somewhere, as you can smell, in the distance, some wild garlic. At least, you think it's wild. After all, what could anyone possibly be getting seasoned in this gloomy, muggy forest? Baba Yaga, the bony-legged, rides in a mortar, drives it along with a pestle, sweeps up her tracks with a hearth broom. So sings the traditional rhyme about the chief of Russian fairy tale witches, an evil spirit and handmaiden of the devil represented under the guise of an ugly old woman and sorceress, whose hut turns on chicken legs. Baba Yaga is a crucial part of Russia's identity and past. Those of us outside of Russia know of Baba Yaga largely thanks to the artwork of Russian artist Ivan Bilibin and the translations of Alexander Afanasyev's fairy tales. Although Baba Yaga is firmly associated with Slavic traditions, her popularity and presence have risen globally since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. And her popularity has been further facilitated by art and audiovisual media forms. In her traditional magic tales, Baba Yaga is described as lying on her stove, her body from one corner of the hut to the other, and her nose sticking up into the ceiling. Many tales emphasize her ugliness, with particular emphasis on the grotesqueness of her womanly body parts. There are many variations of her name, including Yagaya, Yaga, Iga, Yagaba, and Yagabova, to name a few, and all of which have been variously interpreted by linguists, all of which I haven't exactly got, privy access to. However, Afanasyev derived Yaga from Sanskrit word Ari, meaning serpent, snake, and this etymology has been further explored by scholars who have attempted to show that Baba Yaga is derived from the snake. But there are others who have found this etymology unconvincing and suggest that her name bears a connotation to various Indo-European terms meaning pain, or to torture, worry, doubt, or even sadness. What's most fascinating about Baba Yaga is that she doesn't fit neatly into any identifiable fairy tale roles. Whilst most characters, according to Vladamir Propp's analysis, fall into one of two categories, those being villain or donor, those are his terms, Baba Yaga is more difficult to analyse, as she adopts multiple different roles throughout her tales, from donor to warrior and even abductor. In his Morphology of Folklore, Propp classifies Baba Yaga as a hostile or unwilling donor, which can be likened to more familiar terms that many of us use, such as the anti-hero. In many tales, Baba Yaga makes remarks to the story's hero or heroine that implies that she harbours cannibalistic intentions, but then she quickly backs down on such inferences. Cannibalism is a core feature of Baba Yaga's character. In those tales, she senses Russians with her keen nose, and she tests the mettle and wisdom of the protagonists who come to her hut. Baba Yaga's tests and presence probe the hero's strength, cleverness, and worthiness as adults, and when the hero or heroine faces up to Baba Yaga's challenges, whether asking the right questions, giving assertive answers, or performing impossible tasks, or winning the graces of her servants, they find the passage home and return with more wisdom and courage. Now, before we get into the very complex nature of Baba Yaga's multitude of stories, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace. So as you know, you can look on the screen now, I have built all of my main websites over the past few years with Squarespace, including my upcoming Lady of the Library website, which I'm very excited to launch soon. Now, I love how intuitive and easy Squarespace makes website building and design. Now, I don't know anything about coding, which is made using other website platforms incredibly frustrating, but with Squarespace, I can simply drag and drop my content where I want it. And if you're a creator like me who wants to expand their revenue stream, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that makes it easy for you to monetize your content and expertise in a way that fits your brand. Squarespace has a member area that lets you sell your courses or classes to followers, and it also has an inbuilt email campaign option where you can collect email subscribers and convert them into loyal customers, all from your website. And the built-in analytics feature gives you insight into who's visiting your site, where their traffic is coming from, the time they spend on your site, and the most read contents, audience geography, and so much more. So if you want to expand your business in the new year or just build a beautiful blogging website at your leisure, then squarespace.com is for you. So go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Lady of the Library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much, Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video, and now let's go into the complicated story history of Baba Yaga. So Baba Yaga is incredibly unique in her ambiguous existence across Russian folklore, a feature which has been acknowledged and discussed since the 18th century. In his 1782 Dictionary of Russian Superstitions, Chalkov declares Baba Yaga to be an underworld goddess venerated by the ancient Slavs, who made blood sacrifices to her. In 1946, Vladamir Propp discussed how the roots of the magic tale were quite a departure from the method of synchronic analysis that he had applied throughout the rest of his Morphology, as Baba Yaga tales lacked the pattern that the others possessed. Now, Propp's ideas of folklore patterns is in itself deeply flawed, as the synchronic analysis which underlies the entirety of his theoretical framework in the Morphology relies on the idea that all human societies from Africa to Americas evolve in the same manner and thus establish a pattern within their folkloric structures, which is obviously incredibly inaccurate. However, he wasn't wrong with his invested interest in the uniqueness of Baba Yaga. For a start, in many of her tales, Baba Yaga is a relative to the hero or heroine, but she's not exactly an evil stepmother, although that's not the trope that she always plays, though she can be something very similar. You see, she often plays a distant relative to the hero or heroine's mother or wife, a totemic clan member, as it were, but never a close relative, and thus she has a kinship with the protagonist of the tale, but her ambivalent and distant relations to the protagonist make her sense of loyalty elusive. Additionally, Baba Yaga's association with the forest is significant. The forest is both the place of initiation and the entrance to the land of the dead, and Baba Yaga is the guardian who lives at the gateway. Her hut, in which she is cramped inside like a body within a coffin, faces towards the land of the dead, and the hero or heroine must make the hut turn with a magic formula. And the hero cannot simply walk around to the other side. They must undergo an initiation and pass through. From a psychoanalyst's point of view, Baba Yaga is nearly impossible to interpret, which I can only imagine is terribly frustrating for them, because we all know how much they love to rip into the psychology of mythical and folklorish figures. Some Jungians have suggested and interpreted that she is a representative of the Great Mother. You see, in some stories, she captures the hero by imitating their mother's voice, and in others, she serves as a midwife. And in other stories, the hero even addresses her as Mother. But then this isn't exactly straightforward. Baba Yaga exists in so many different forms that she's impossible to secure under one psychoanalytic frame. So we had to divide her into children's stories and adult stories because, again, she serves a different role in each. In children's stories, Baba Yaga is an overwhelmingly negative figure. Not always, but overwhelmingly so. playing the villain role who kidnaps children or tries to cook them like the witch does in Hansel and Gretel. In fact, one of Baba Yaga's stories is almost identical to the tale of Hansel and Gretel and is likely the one that inspired the latter story. This negative connotation likely stems from the traditional East Slavic ritual of baking children. Yes, baking children. You see, this involved putting sickly children in the oven for short periods of time. While it may bear no historical relationship to the folklore, this ritual does suggest that the oven can function as a symbol of the womb. However, unlike Hansel and Gretel's story, where the children were driven away by their evil stepmother and returned to the loving arms of a father, Sans stepmother, the child protagonists of Baba Yaga's tales return to a loving mother, who now stands in a new light after they encountered Baba Yaga. In children's tales focusing on a female child protagonist, the good/bad mother complex is presented far more complexly than those stories starring a male protagonist. Sometimes Baba Yaga turns out to be the evil stepmother, and in others, she is a kind alternative to the child's own stepmother at home, who sent the child out into the forest, like we see in Hansel and Gretel. Now again, as you can see, there's no single formula to any of these stories. However, in the girl-centered stories, Baba Yaga's oven, symbolic of the womb, is not seen as a danger as much as it is seen as so to the male protagonist. Now, it wouldn't be fair for me to not share one of the many stories featuring Baba Yaga in this video, so let me share this one with you, which is called The Story of Baba Yaga and Vasilisa the Brave, written by Rosie Sharkey, who was inspired by the retelling by Margaret Bates and Hill. The tale reads as follows. Once, long ago, on the edge of a deep, dark forest, there lived a little girl called Vasilisa. She lived in a cottage with her father, who loved her very much. Vasilisa's father chopped down trees in the forest for firewood and hunted deer and trapped rabbits for them to eat. He sewed the animal skins into warm clothes, and each spring he travelled far away to sell them in a big town. Vasilisa gathered mushrooms and berries in the forest, made bread from acorn flour, and fished in the bright stream that ran beneath the trees. She followed her father as he hunted, and knew all the paths in the woods for miles around their house. But she had to stay close at home when she was alone. Wolves roamed the forest and could eat a little girl up in a moment. One day, Vasilisa's father became ill. He lay in his bed, sweating and shaking. Vasilisa made him soup from dried mushrooms and rabbit, and gave him cold water from the stream. After a week, her father became even weaker. He couldn't swallow his food, and he didn't recognize Vasilisa anymore. She knew that if she didn't find a cure, her father would die. That night, Vasilisa had a dream. A voice said to her, "In a chicken-legged house you will find the spell. To cure your father and make him well, follow the path at the end of the nose to the heart of the forest where nobody goes." Vasilisa was frightened when she spoke. Her father had told her stories of Baba Yaga, an old witch who lived in a chicken-leg house in the forest. But Vasilisa knew that witches know spells, and she knew that nothing but magic could make her father better now. Vasilisa wanted to leave her father some food, in case he got better while she was away. There was not much food left in the house for her to take on her journey to the heart of the forest, so Vasilisa just wrapped up a crust of bread with a pat of butter. She took one rabbit bone with some meat left on it. Vasilisa combed her hair with a little wooden comb and tied a little red ribbon to it. She wrapped her blue silk scarf around her neck, kissed her father goodbye, and set off bravely into the dark wood. All that day she walked on paths she knew, through the still trees. But without her father, she was afraid of the wolves. In the evening she caught fish in the stream and smoked it over a fire. She climbed up into the tree, tied herself into a branch with her scarf, and slept a little, watched over by the cold night stars. The next day Vasilisa walked so far into the woods that she no longer knew the way. When she felt afraid, she repeated the words from her dream over and over as she walked. "In a chicken-leg hut you will find the spell to cure your father and make him well. Follow the path and into the nose to the heart of the forest where nobody goes." That evening, Vasilisa saw lights shining ahead of her in the forest. As she got closer, She saw that the lights were skulls on posts. She knew then that she was near the home of the witch. Vasilisa pulled one of the posts from the soft forest floor and crept forward, lighting her path with a shining skull. Soon she saw a strange house, hopping on its chicken legs. Around the house there was a fence made of bones. At the old metal gate, a huge tangled tree stood guard. Vasilisa crept towards the house and pushed open the old metal gate. But as she pushed, it gave a loud creak. "Oh, poor gate," said Vasilisa. "You need some grease to stop the squeak." And she took a little pat of butter and rubbed it on the hinges so the gate swung slightly closed behind her. Suddenly, a skinny brown dog came bounding towards her, barking ferociously. "Oh, poor little dog, you look hungry," said Vasilisa, as she took out the rabbit bone with a scrap of meat and gave it to him. The dog stopped barking, gave a wag of his tail, and ran off with the bone. Vasilisa walked up to the chicken-legged house and knocked on the door. The door swung open, and there was Baba Yaga herself. Vasilisa gasped with fear, but the old witch was so big, so bad and so bony. But worst of all, Baba Yaga's mouth was full of sharp iron teeth.
"Who are you and what do you want?"
snarled the red mouth, and Vasilisa saw the iron teeth flash fire. But Vasilisa was brave and determined, so she smiled at the witch and she said, "Good evening, Baba Yaga. My name is Vasilisa, and I came to ask if you could have a spell that could help my sick father. I came to find you because I had a dream that said, in a chicken-legged house you will find the spell to cure your father and make him well. Follow the path at the end of your nose to the heart of the forest where nobody goes." Baba Yaga smiled a terrible smile with her iron teeth.
"Come in, child. My old bones are weary and I could use some help around the house."
Baba Yaga hobbled over to the box in the corner and pulled out a tiny glass bottle.
"Here is a potion that will cure your father, but in return, you must stay here with me tonight and cook and clean for me, and then you can go back to your father in the morning."
Vasilisa was worried that her father might die while she cleaned the chicken-legged house, but it was her deepest, darkest night, and she couldn't walk home in the forest alone, because the wolves prowled the dark. So she thanked Baba Yaga and went into the chicken-legged house. First, Vasilisa scrubbed the wooden floor and table. Then she built up a fire, and then she began chopping onions for soup. Baba Yaga went out into the forest, chucking quietly. As soon as the witch left, a bony black cat jumped onto the kitchen table and licked Vasilisa's hand. "Oh, poor cat, you look hungry," said Vasilisa, as she took out her crust of stale bread and then fed it to the cat. When she had finished, the cat jumped up into Vasilisa's lap.
"Child, you must run as fast as you can, back along the path at the end of your nose, for Baba Yaga is planning to eat you with her iron teeth for dinner."
Vasilisa thought of the wolves and their sharp teeth, but she was more afraid of Baba Yaga's wicked iron teeth. "I will run as fast as I can, back along the path at the end of my nose, but what if Baba Yaga chases me?" she asked the cat.
"Take your scarf and your comb if she comes after you. First, throw your blue silk scarf, and then your little wooden comb."
Vasilisa took the tiny glass bottle of the healing potion, thanked the cat, and ran down the steps of the chicken-legged house. The skinny dog ran up to her and licked her hand and wagged its tail. The old metal gate opened silently to let Vasilisa pass. But the huge tangled tree reached its branches down and caught hold of Vasilisa, and it would not let her pass. Vasilisa thought for a moment, and she undid her bright red ribbon from her hair and tied it around the lowest branch. Then the tree released Vasilisa from the prison of branches, and she ran back along the path at the end of her nose. Baba Yaga returned to the chicken-legged house. She was looking forward to dinner. It was years since she had eaten a tender little girl. When she saw that the house was empty, she screamed at the bony black cat.
"Cat! Cat! Why did you let her go? You should have scratched out her eyes and yowled to call me."
But the cat gave a hiss and a spit.
"For years and years I have served you, and yet you never gave me a single crumb from your plate. I had to live on the rats that I could catch, and you use most of them for your spells. But Vasilisa gave me her own crust of bread.
Baba Yaga rushed out of the house on her long, bony legs.
Dog! Dog! Where is she? Why did you let her go? You should have eaten her hand and barked to call me.
But the skinny brown dog gave a howl and a growl. For years and years I have served you, and yet you never gave me a single dry bone. But Vasilisa gave me her own fresh rabbit bone with a scrap of meat. Baba Yaga rushed down to the gate on her long, bony legs.
Gate! Gate! Where is she? Why did you let her go? You should have locked yourself shut and squeaked to warn me.
But the old metal gate gave a creak and a squeak. For years and years I have served you, and yet you never gave me a single drop of oil. But Vasilisa gave me her own pat of sweet butter to grease my rusty hinges. Out of the gate went Baba Yaga on her long, bony legs.
Birch tree! Birch tree! Where is she? Why did you let her go? You should have caught her in the tangle of your branches and held her for me.
But the leaves of the tree rustled and sighed. For years and years I have served you, and yet you never gave me even a piece of string to decorate my branches. But Vasilisa gave me her own bright red ribbon and made me feel beautiful. Then Baba Yaga gave a terrible cry and jumped into her mortar. Taking up her great pestle, she gave an enormous push, and swoosh, 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 she chased through the forest after Vasilisa. Vasilisa was running as fast as she could, following the lights of the skulls. She heard the noise, swish, swish, swish behind her, and she saw Baba Yaga rushing closer and closer through the trees. Remembering the cat's advice, Vasilisa threw her blue silk scarf down behind her and ran on. The blue silk scarf turned into a great deep river. Baba Yaga's stone mortar was too heavy to float across. The witch paced up and down the bank with the magical river, gnashing her iron teeth. Then she called out,
I'll munch this girl, I'll crunch her liver. Come to me, cows, and drink the river.
Then Baba Yaga's herd of white cows ran down to the water and gulped and slurped it all up until they had drunk the river dry. Baba Yaga was off again with her pestle and mortar. Squish, squish, squish. Vasilisa heard the noise of the squish, squish, squish behind her as she saw Baba Yaga racing closer and closer through the trees. Remembering the cat's advice, Vasilisa threw her little wooden comb down behind her and ran on. The teeth of the comb sprang to life, and each tooth became a thorn tree. Baba Yaga blundered into the forest of thorns, and they tangled around her so she was trapped. Baba Yaga was in fury. With her iron teeth, she started to bite her way through the trees. Gnash and gnaw, gnash and gnaw. The trees fell all around her. But as she bit through each branch, 10 more sprang up in its place, covered with thorns. At last, exhausted, scratched and hungry, Baba Yaga gave up the chase and went back to her chicken-legged house in the heart of the forest where nobody goes. And as for Vasilisa, she heard the gnashing and gnawing behind her, but she ran on and on without looking back all the long night until she came to her father's house in the forest just as the sun was rising. Vasilisa ran into her father's bedroom, full of fear that she would be too late. Her father lay on the bed, with his cheeks pale, his arms thin, and his eyes closed. Vasilisa saw his chest rising and falling slowly, and knew that there was still life in him. She took the tiny glass bottle of Baba Yaga's potion and poured it between her father's lips, saying, In a chicken-legged house, I found the spell to cure my father and make him well. I followed the path at the end of my nose to the heart of the forest where nobody goes. Vasilisa's father gave a great cough, and his cheeks turned red. He gave another cough, and his thin arms were strong and muscular again. He gave a third cough, and opened his eyes. When he saw his little daughter, he wrapped her up in a huge bear hug and cried tears of joy. Vasilisa and her father lived together happily on the edge of the deep, dark forest. When she grew up, Vasilisa had many more adventures, and she became known as Vasilisa the Brave. This was an example of Baba Yaga in a children's story, but in adult stories, the picture of Baba Yaga's hostility, benevolence, and ambiguity changes, and she's less significant and tends to only appear in shorter episodes within a bigger tale. In male-centered adult stories, Baba Yaga serves as a donor who mediates male anxieties about his role as a man. both in terms of patriarchal gender norms and, heterosexual sexuality norms. However, in tales where she serves as a villain to the male protagonist, her actions threaten the male identity in the most Freudian way possible, and she is seen as a symbol of his fear of castration. In female-centered adult stories, she usually helps the protagonist find her lost spouse, or usurps the female protagonist entirely to threaten the woman's post-marital security. Baba Yaga's dual nature and depictions likely come from the multiple conflicting potential origins of the characters. For example, sorceresses in Russia were seen as harmless figures making charms, casting spells and mixing potions, and the sorceress origins of Baba Yaga are likely reflected in her pestle and mortar mode of transportation. Protective sorcery is very distinguishable from witchcraft, and the social shifts in viewing Baba Yaga as more of a witch than a sorceress may be a reflection of the demonization by the medieval church of folklore and peasant superstitions. As Megan Armnecht claimed, fairy tales and figures such as Baba Yaga can help people negotiate their identity and establish discursive interactions within a social context, even as this social context is transmitted across different media and involves empirical and fictional beings. Facing Baba Yaga gave the protagonists the ability not only to survive, but also to thrive within their home in Russia, as they gained a greater understanding of themselves and the world around them. Thank you so much for listening to this wee little video on Baba Yaga. A lot of the research out there was more on the etymology of her name, but as someone who doesn't read Russian, I couldn't cover that and do it justice. So I stuck to what I could cover, and there are a lot of stories out there about Baba Yaga. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of understanding of how varied this character is and how deep the lore goes. Also, I'd like to shout out to my friend Meg, because I was thinking about her when I was trying to think of things to write about. I thought, you know what, there's actually a new book that's just come out called Thistlefoot that my friend Meg loves, and so does my friend Emily, so I thought I'd do a Baba Yaga video and also recommend the book, which I'll link down below. The link down below is an affiliate link, so if you treat yourself to a book on Thistlefoot and Baba Yaga, which has also been named one of the best books of 2022, you'll be supporting my channel indirectly by treating yourself, so that's all down there. Thank you so much again, Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video, and I will see you soon, physically as well, back in another video next week. So I'm looking forward to seeing your faces again, indirectly. Can't really see your faces, can I? But you can see mine, so it kind of counts. Anyway, I hope you are happy and healthy, and remember, books save lives, so keep reading.